Good afternoon and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus. I wanted to add to the video I did yesterday and talk to you about biblical prophecy. How do I know these things are going to happen? When I'm making my fiercely rhetorical video, this will be your final warning and people are going, wow, is it really going to happen? How do you know? Even though I've done it many times in the past, clearly you either didn't watch that video or you just weren't listening. So we're going to go through it again now. We're going to read Zechariah chapter 14, which is one of the very last bits of the Old Testament, which is about the prophecy of today. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 1. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. So what does that mean? Behold, the day of the Lord cometh means there is a day coming where the Lord will be with you and you will survive. But if you are not with the Lord, you will not. That's what this means. And thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. Thy spoil means your stuff. Thy spoil is your money in your bank accounts, the income you get from your job, the food in your cupboards, the stuff in your land. You know, stuff in the shops, the economy, earthly goods. It shall be divided in the midst of thee. So what that means is everyone's going to be having a little bit, but nobody's going to have a lot. It will be divided. You know, anyone who's got collected savings, they're going to dwindle and be divided. Now, how do we think that's going to happen? How do we think, bearing in mind this is non-specific to a person, this is everybody in all countries, how do we think there's going to be a day when the Lord is coming, and on that day, thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee, all over the world, to everyone? How is that going to happen? Well, something will have to trigger the economy collapsing. Then everyone's going to be panicking and running to Scrabble to get a bit of that divided spoil for themselves, and the end result is everyone will have a little bit, no one will have a lot. Except the people who listened to my warning and collected stuff and made it secure now, before this starts to happen. 2. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. So what does this mean? Well, for I, as in God will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. So all the nations that oppose Jerusalem, i.e. the city of David where Jesus was born, everyone in the world, all the nations who oppose Israel and Christianity, so Muslim nations and communist nations, they're the only people it's talking about here. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, Algeria, Libya, North Korea and China and Russia. They're the nations that don't like Israel or Christianity. They are the ones who God is going to gather together to battle. So they're going to gather together against Jerusalem. God's going to battle them. And the house is rifled, the women ravished, and half the city shall go into captivity. That's talking about Israel. So the gathered nations are going to attack Israel. They're going to physically invade. Half the city shall be taken. And those houses will be ransacked and those women will be ravished, you know, like sexually attacked, raped, whatever. And half the city shall be the residue. So the bigger half is going to be taken. The residue is the smaller half. You know, it's not really halves, but the bigger portion is going to be ravaged, destroyed. All the house is going to be ransacked. The residue that's left, because that's what residue means, the bit that's left is going to be not cut off from the city. So what that means is, even though the city's been ransacked and attacked and there's a war going on, the residue are going to be resolute. They're going to be strong. They're going to mount a defence and they're going to have collected stuff. So their stuff won't be divided. Everyone else's is going to be divided. They're going to be the defence with God behind them. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. What does this mean? Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations. That means God is going to be behind the smaller load, the residue, i.e. Israel and the Christian nations who are against this jihad. That's what it is. The war is the jihad. And it's going to be like when he fought in the day of battle. Now, there's only one point in the Bible described as the day of battle where the Lord is actually there. That is the day when he's in the desert and he's battling Satan. Satan's tempting him for 3 days and he's saying no, no, no. And then at the fourth temptation, Satan leaves and Jesus is victorious. So he's saying just like that in the desert, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 things that happen. Then on the fourth one, Satan will be gone. Jesus will win. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof towards the east and towards the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove towards the north and half towards the south. Now, I covered this in great detail in a previous video with all these verses in. The Mount of Olives is a real place. It is the place after the road, you leave Bethlehem, go up the road from Bethlehem, then you've got the Mount of Olives, and there's a cut-off point between the Mount of Olives. On the other side of the mountain is a place that used to be called Azazel, which is now the West Bank. So we know exactly where this is talking about, and there is indeed a big mountain with a split in the middle. And there is now a road going through that split, which cuts through the mountain. So one half of the mountain is to the north and one half is to the south. That's what this is talking about. The road out of Bethlehem towards where the West Bank is, through the area known as Azel. That's this area. And his feet shall stand on that day upon the Mount of Olives. So Jesus is going to be there, stood on this mountain, between Bethlehem and the West Bank, which is where the Muslim guys are contesting. That's where they are. They're going to be looking to come in and fight in Jerusalem like we've seen. Jesus is going to be there to make sure they lose. And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azazel. West Bank. Yes, ye shall flee as ye fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Now, there's another bit in the Bible where the king of Judah is there, Uzziah, and there's a great earthquake, which is caused by God's rage. And there's a load of soldiers there, and they flee. They drop all their weapons and they run away. They're terrified. They know this is God's anguish, and that they are terrified of it. So that's what this is saying. Like when they fled from God, even though they were stronger force and they went in all brave and courageous and they thought they were going to win a war and kill a bunch of people, they didn't. God appeared and earthquake, and they fled. And most of them actually died. And the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. This isn't talking about the saints, because we haven't had the New Testament yet. So when this says saints, it's talking about people who believe in God. They're the saints. So the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. So all the people who are the residue, i.e. the ones who got ready and stuck around for the defense and protected Israel and did what God asked them to do in this book, God will be with them personally, there in the flesh. And they will be victorious. That's what this means. But it's not going to be easy. 6. And it shall come to pass in that day that the light shall not be clear, nor dark, but it shall one day which shall not be known only to the Lord, not day nor night. But it shall come to pass that in the evening time, then it shall be light. So this is a bit more difficult to work out. We did this in more detail before, so I'll just summarise it. But it shall be one day which shall be known only to the Lord, not day nor night, but it shall come to pass that at the evening time there shall be light. So what it's saying is, the light's there, the light of God is the word of truth and the prophecies, you know what I'm trying to tell you. That's there, it's lit up, it's obvious, but it's not clear. So for some reason, it's light and you're not seeing it, it's not clear to you, because your doubt is covering your eyes, or Satan's false doctrines, or propaganda in the media. For some reason, the light's over there, really brightly shining, me telling you, making it obvious, reading you the Bible. With the Bible here, I'm verse by verse going through it. For some reason, you're not seeing it. It's not clear to you. But it shall be known, one day which shall be known only to the Lord, that an evening time will come, and then in the evening time it shall be clear. That's now. The evening time means just before the night, just before the bad thing happens at the night. The evening time is, we haven't got much time left before the thing, then it will become clear. So that's talking about in 3 weeks' time, when everybody's aware of this global conflict, the World War beginning, because of the Israel thing, because of the jihad, then it will become clear. Then the light will become clear. So that's what Jesus is telling you here. At that point, when the light becomes clear, it's going to be immediate at that point. So we've only got 3 weeks to get ready before that, like I said. And it shall be in that day that living waters shall go out of Jerusalem, half of them towards the former sea, and half of them towards the hinder sea. In the summer and in the winter shall it be. So we know, in the summer and the winter. When does the summer end? June, July, August. When does the winter begin? October, November. So between the end of the summer, July, August, and the beginning of winter, October, November, this is being described as the evening time. So now is the evening time, because October is 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away before the the birthday of Muhammad's celebration, when they're going to do the jihad. So this is telling us the exact time. Even though they had a different calendar, and there's been 2 different calendars since then, now we use a Julian calendar, God knew that was going to happen. He knew we were going to switch calendars, or someone was going to switch calendars, so that we couldn't use, specific dates. So he says, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall there be one Lord, and his name also one. All the land shall be turned as to a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, and it shall be lifted up and inhabited in her place, from Benjamin's gate unto the place of the first gate, unto the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel unto the king's wine presses. So what that's saying, after the bit between the summer and the winter shall it be. So we went through when that is. That's now, at the end of July, August to the start of October, November. That's that bit. That's the evening where we've not got a lot of time left to prepare. We're in that bit now. After that time happens, then the Lord shall be king over all the earth. So the Lord's going to come down and be king over the whole earth. Something's going to happen that's going to let everyone know this is the Lord, which is this. All the land shall be turned as a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. So what does that mean? All the land being turned into a plain. What is a plain? A plain is a flat piece of land without anything on it. No trees, no buildings, nothing. It's just a plain. We know that's what the land looked like before we built our cities on it. It was a plain to begin with. But now it's got all cities on it. Why is it being described as a plain? Does it mean all the cities are just going to disappear overnight? No. Even if there's a big bomb or some big war breaks out, it's still not going to go back to being a physical plain, because there'll be ruins of stuff. So we know when he's describing it as a plain, it's a metaphor for winds blowing across it, because that's what happens on a plain. Plains are windy because there's nothing to resist the weather. So we know plains mean winds. And we know it's winter, so it's icy wind. What is the metaphor for an icy wind in the Bible? It is Satan. Satan is described as an icy wind. Also in the Quran, Allah describes himself as an icy wind. So we know when Jesus says, the Lord shall be king over all the earths, all the land shall be turned as to a plain, he's saying Satan's icy winds are going to be blowing through the land at that point when Jesus is there in the winter. And it will be from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. Geba is where the Golan Heights is. Jerusalem is the middle of Israel. So we know Hananel, the wine presses, the Mount of Olives is in the middle of these 2 areas. The area at the top is the West Bank. Past that is Syria and Iran. So that's going to be coming this way to get to Jerusalem, which is here. So it's describing the movement of a war towards Jerusalem through that little mountain valley where the Lord will be stood. And men shall dwell in it, and there shall be no more destruction. There shall be no more ultimate destruction, but Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their sockets, and their tongues shall consume away in their mouths. So what does this mean? Well, after the war coming from Syria, Iran and the West Bank towards Jerusalem, through the Mount of Olives where Jesus is stood, he's going to be watching this happen. When that happens, men shall dwell in it. And after that there shall be no more utter destruction. So there's going to be utter destruction from this war coming from the north, Syria, Iran, Lebanon, West Bank through the Mount of Olives. Jesus is going to be stood there to watch it to make sure they lose. But there's going to be utter destruction. So it is going to be a big conflict, a big war. Probably going to be some kind of a bomb, chemical or a nuclear weapon that's going to cause this utter destruction. So that's what it's talking about here when it says utter destruction. Then after that, men shall dwell in it, and there shall be no more utter destruction. But Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. So even though there's going to be this horrible chemical weapon or nuclear weapon, there's going to be utter destruction. Because the Lord is stood there, he's going to make sure it's inhabitable afterwards. So that needs to happen. That's biblical prophecy there. There's going to be utter destruction from some kind of a big weapon that's going to cause all this destruction. And then afterwards, the only reason it's going to be habitable in Jerusalem and that area is because of the Lord being there. So we know this is the final prophecy. And there shall be the plague wherewithin the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away whilst they stand on their feet, their eyes shall consume in their sockets, their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. This is describing the effect of a large weapon going off, which rots people's eyes and tongues away in their face, and all their flesh rots off while they're stood on their feet. What could that mean? Well, it's talking about a chemical or a nuclear weapon, isn't it? And we know the area they've come past the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights is a good strategic military position where if you are up there, nobody can shoot you because you're on the top of a big tabletop mountain, so you need to get up and over to reach it. But you've got increased range if you're sat up there. So that's where they're going to fire the, the missile or the bomb or whatever is going to come over the top of there. And on the top of the Golan Heights is going to be a conflict there as well. We know that. And then they're going to lose. Jerusalem and the Christians are going to win. That's what this says. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord shall be among them, and they shall lay hold every one on the hand of his neighbour, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbour. So what does this mean? Well, and it shall come to pass in that day, so the day when the Lord stood there, the armies, the big utter destruction thing has already happened. After that happens and everyone's flesh is rotted away from this big weapon, the enemies of God. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord shall be among them. What's tumult? Tumultuous means tempestuous, angry, raged, frothy mouth, angry. A great tumult from the Lord. So the Lord is stood there watching this fight happen. And after the utter destruction, that's going to enrage the Lord. So that's definitely going to happen. The Lord is waiting. The Lord has given these guys free will to not do that. At any point, they could just turn back and not do it. Even though the Lord is stood there, they can physically see Jesus stood there watching them. They have no belief in him. So they're going to do it anyway. This is going to enrage the Lord, and they're going to be shown his tumult. So after the bomb, after the bomb goes off, they're still doing the war. It hasn't stopped them. That is why Jesus is going to show them tumult. And guess what? The tumult terrifies them. And they shall lay hold every one of his hand upon his neighbour, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbour. So that means they're going to be panicking at this point when Jesus gets angry. They're going to be holding each other's hands going, oh, what's going on? What do we do? And they're going to be going, this is your fault. Yeah, you should have warned me that Jesus was real. Why did you tell me Allah was real? They're going to be arguing amongst themselves, and they're going to be terrified because Jesus is going to judge them. And Judah also shall fight at Jerusalem. Judah is the northern kingdom where the West Bank is. That's the contested areas where there's lots of Palestinians, lots of jihadis. And Judah shall also fight at Jerusalem, which is the centre of Israel. So we know the war is going to carry on even after Jesus has got angry. They're going to keep carrying on anyway, which means that's it. They're not going to be saved. They had one final warning from Jesus, stood there being angry, giving them tumult. They still aren't listening, so they're clearly Satanists. That's the only explanation for that, is these people, even though they've seen Jesus telling them to stop, they've completely ignored him, they've gone on anyway. This has enraged Jesus. Jesus is now going to punish them. And the wealth of all the heathen round about shall be gathered together, gold, silver, food, and apparel in great abundance. That's talking about the massive, the huge amounts of aid that Israel has gathered around where Rafah and Gaza have been under siege. And the conditions are, Gazans, if you surrender and just stop attacking us, you can have all this collected gold, silver, food and clothing. That's why it's there. It's under guard. They can't have it unless they stop attacking Israel. That's the condition. But if they stop attacking Israel, not only will they have peace immediately, because they're the ones that started the war, they can have all this money and clothing and goods. So Israel is trying to negotiate and buy them off by saying, if you stop killing us, you can have all this stuff, you'll be rich. But they don't want it. And so shall the plague of the horse, the mule, the camel, and the ass, and all of these beasts that shall be in the tents as this plague. So after they say no to the ceasefire, they want to continue to try and kill all the Jews, despite that Jesus is physically stood there, and the Israelis are trying to buy them off with this huge amount of riches. They're so enraged and racist and hateful towards the Jews and Jesus, who is a Jew. They don't want any of that stuff. They're working for Satan. Satan has promised them a bigger reward than all this, even though they're never going to get it because he's a liar. That's what they're working for. They're not going to listen to Jesus. They're not going to listen to reason. They're not going to go for the peace. They can't be bought off with money. They are insane cultists of death that want to kill all the Jews and Christians, and they want to build their caliphate. And so shall be. So this is what's going to happen next. The plague of the horse, the mule, the camel, and the ass, and the beast that shall be in these tents as this plague. Now, who is likely to have tents here? Because we're in Jerusalem at this point. People in Jerusalem don't live in tents. The people of Jerusalem have brick houses. They have buildings. So people in tents are invading parties. The people in the tents are the jihadis, the Muslims, the West Bank people, the Palestinians, Hamas and Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, Lebanon. Those guys are in tents because they've set up tents with all their stuff in, their camels, horses, donkeys and all their stuff, because they're a raiding party. They're at war, and that is their war tent. So that's what this is talking about. And so shall be. The plague of the horse, of the mule, of the camel, of the ass. These are all animals that the Muslims are going to be using, or they would be using, if they were in a desert. Because, even though they've got modern day vehicles and guns and everything else, it's still blazingly hot in the middle of a desert where they come from. So the easiest, best way to get across the desert without being spotted, because that's what they do, assassin, they don't want to be seen until the last moment where they put the knife in your back. They use animals. So they have camels to get across the desert, they have horses to ride on when they're fighting, and they have donkeys to, carry about all their stuff between the tents. All these beasts shall be in the tents when this plague comes to them, the plague that the Lord's going to put upon them. And so it shall come to pass that every one that is left of all the nations which came up against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the feast of the tabernacles. So what does this mean? And it shall come to pass after the whole plague thing. So Jesus is there, the utter destruction has happened, the big invasion of Jerusalem from the jihadis has happened. Jesus has tried to warn them, tried to stop them without doing anything. They weren't going to be stopped. Israel tried to buy them off, negotiate peace. They weren't interested in peace. They want to kill all the Jews and Christians and set up their caliphate for Satan. And in the end, Jesus couldn't stop them, so he just smashes them with his holy fire. And he puts a plague on them to make sure that they are completely dead. So what happens? And it shall come to pass. So we know this is, even though it sounds unbelievable, Jesus is saying, and it shall come to pass. Jesus is telling you this will definitely happen. Every one that is left of all the nations which came up against Jerusalem. So obviously, like we saw in the fall of Jericho, in the fall of Jericho, the entire town gets razed to the ground and destroyed, just from simple trumpets of holy music being played. But there is a single family which believed in God in that whole town, and they didn't die. They got led out safely, and they became part of the ancestry of Jesus. Rahab. That's what they're talking about here. Everyone who is left from those destroyed nations that came upon Israel, the few survivors who weren't loyal to the jihadis, who actually were loyal to God, they will come out, and they shall even go up from year to worship at Jerusalem. So they will become Christians, and every year they'll be doing a worship in Jerusalem. And they will go up from year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of the Tabernacles. The Feast of the Tabernacles is a shared religious festival between Jews and Christians where they celebrate the victory of God. So that's telling you at the very end there, God will have a victory. And it shall be that whoso will not come up to all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. So even the people who stayed at home from the countries that went to war with Jerusalem and got destroyed, those countries can expect a drought, famine, starvation, unless they pray to the Lord. That's the Lord's plague on them. They're going to get droughts. And we know from current day geology, there are droughts in the countries surrounding Israel who are fighting against them. Egypt's got one. Jordan had one. Lebanon had one. Saudi Arabia's got one. All these countries have got droughts on. And if the family of Egypt go not up, and come not, that will have no rain. There shall be a plague there, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the feast of the tabernacles. So it's physically naming Israel and Egypt. It's saying, and if the family of Egypt go not up, so if the family of Egypt don't go to do this feast of the tabernacle in Israel, if they don't submit to God at this point, there shall be a plague upon them, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen. Who is the heathen? Heathens means anyone who worships anyone else apart from the Lord, who is God. So we know Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iran, Lebanon, Algeria, Libya, all these places, even though they didn't go to the war, they had some people stay at home, they are all going to be beset by the plague of a drought and famine, and that's going to continue until they either die or they come and do the feast of the tabernacle and they pray to the Lord, who is God. And if they don't, the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the feast. So they will also get smite. Smite means bang, you are hit by something. Smiting means you got cut or shot or punched or something bad happened physically to harm you. The Lord will physically smite them for doing this. This shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations that come not to keep that feast. And in that day shall there be upon the bells of the horses holiness unto the Lord. And the pots in the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. So if we break this down, the smiting and the plagues and the famines and everything else, that would be the punishment upon Egypt, and the punishment upon all the other nations who are like Egypt, who don't want to worship the Lord, who are fighting against Israel, even though they've stopped their war because they saw Jesus and they saw the huge victory that Israel and Jesus got. All these other nations got totally destroyed apart from like the odd few. Even though they saw that, they're still not worshipping God. And God is saying, this will be the punishment on Egypt and all those other nations, the ones that survived, if they don't now come and do the Feast of the Tabernacle and worship God. If they don't do that, they're going to get smites, they're going to get plagues, they're going to get famines, and they will die. And in that day when that happens, so they're all dead, there's only good people left now, in that day shall there be upon the bells of the horses. Now, why would you put bells on your horses? Well, you are trotting horses round with bells because the bells are going to be ringing out to make noise. And the reason you're ringing out these bells is to say to everyone else who's good, come back to Jerusalem now, the war is over. So that's the end of the war when those bells ring out. And we know this to be true because after the bells ring out, holiness unto the Lord is in capitals. So this is being declared, holiness to the Lord with the bells, come back to Jerusalem, everything's now done and safe. Everyone who is unrighteous and evil and sinful, the entire forces of Satan and Allah are dead at this point. The Lord is there with his saints, who remember aren't the New Testament saints, they're not alive yet, it's Old Testament. The saints means everyone who believes in God, who survived, who did this. And the pots in the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. So bowls before the altar is where you put your offerings in. So people put in incense in the old days, or today you put in money, blessings for the church. The pot of the Lord shall be pouring out blessings into your bowl. So after this utter destruction, the war, Jesus warning the people, they go ahead, Satan gets crushed, all the other nations who don't bow to Jesus get famine, smite, and they die. Now we're having this Feast of the Tabernacle at the end of the war. Jesus declared, Holy bells are ringing out. That's it. Everyone's getting holiness unto the Lord. There's no more sin and badness. Everyone's good that's left. Now, Jesus is going to pour out his blessings into your bowl as if it's at the altar. So he's going to give you blessings. You're not going to be given the altar blessings. The altar's going to be giving you blessings. Ye, every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah. Remember, where the bad guys started out was in Judah, where the West Bank is, and then beyond that, Syria and Iran. That area too is now going to be part of Jerusalem. Every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts, and all that they sacrifice shall come and take of them, and seethe therein. And in that day there shall be no more Canaanites in the house of the Lord. Thusly we know that's the end of the period of prophecy. That is the final prophecy, because in that day there shall be no more Canaanites. Now we know Genesis, the first book of the Old Testament, which is the beginning of the prophecy, that entire land is called Canaan. And the Canaanites are pagan cannibals running about, robbing caravans, worshipping all kinds of gods with blood and eating their children and stuff like that. You know, worshipping Amalek and this kind of thing. You know, the owl, the fiery owl that preys on children. In this day, after the Lord of hosts has come and poured out his blessings, all the bad people are dead, there's only righteous people left on earth. In that day there shall be no more Canaanites in the house of the Lord. So the house of the Lord is now everywhere, and there is no more Canaanites. Abel and Cain. Abel was the one who was good, who got killed, who did the blessing to God and was worshipping. Cain is the progenitor of the sinful people on earth today. There shall be no more. Cain's entire family tree at this point is dead. The only remaining people are Abel people, as in worshipping God, and now they're under grace, so there's no more need for law. So that's the end of the biblical prophecy, and that's the end of this reading. So that gives you some kind of idea where I got my ideas from, and you know, the biblical backing of what I said in my last previous videos and the videos that I've made previously. But I want to go through some of Jesus's actual teachings now. So we're going to flick through to Matthew chapter 3, and we're going to read a little bit from there. So the first thing is chapter 3, verse 15. Jesus says, "Suffer it to be so now, for thus become us to fill all righteousness." Then he suffered. So he's saying there's going to be suffering, then there's going to be righteousness. Jesus is going to suffer with you while you suffer. You won't be alone. And at the end, you'll get a victory. That's Jesus saying that. If you believe on Jesus, you believe him here. "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God." Again, Jesus is saying you can't live by bread alone. Even if you're rich, even if you've got loads of food, loads of clothes, gold and silver, you need this. Which means you need to read it. And if you haven't read it up to this point, allow other people to read it to you, like I have been doing and am doing now, and believe on Jesus. Otherwise, the utter destruction will be yours. You don't want that. You want to live. You want to get the blessings poured out afterwards. You want to see that great victory for God's country. You want to be glorified with the Lord. That's why I'm telling you this. You can have that if you just obey the commandments, pray to Jesus, do what he's telling you to do. Get ready, prepare, wait the thing out. Jesus will do the rest. "Follow me," he saith, "I will make you fishers of men." That's him talking to me. What does a fisherman do? A fisherman puts bait on the end of a line, throws it in the water, and encourages a fish to take a bite, then pulls the fish out and has the fish in his hands. You are that fish. I am the fisher of men. Jesus was the fisher of me. So I'm following the example that Jesus gave on putting the bait, which is this, on the end of a line, dangling in front of you to try and encourage you to it. Then when you're in my hands, I'm going to give you to Jesus, and you'll be in the hand of Jesus. You will have his holy word, so you won't be living by bread alone, and you will understand these prophecies are coming to pass now. You won't be blinded by sin or doubt or the false doctrines of Satan. You will be ready for this happening in 3 weeks, starting in 3 weeks. Chapter 5. "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Why would Jesus say, "Blessed are the poor in spirit"? Poor in spirit, what does that even mean? So, spirit is like how enthusiastic you are about the things you're doing. So I'm not poor in spirit. I'm very enthusiastic. I'm very strong in spirit. So I'm trying to tell you these things, and that's the reason why I'm blessed. But the people who aren't doing that, the people who are too scared, doubtful, and fearful, they are blessed also. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus is physically, in his own words, telling you, even if you didn't listen right up until the last point, yes, you will suffer more because you weren't prepared. But if you come to faith at that very last moment, Jesus will save you, and then you will be blessed, and the kingdom of heaven will be equally yours as it is mine. We'll both be equally rewarded. Despite the fact that I've gone through the pain and suffering and the ridicule and taken all the risks to do this, and I've spent my life doing this. You haven't. You've just come at the last minute. We will be equally rewarded because we're being rewarded for our love of God. So me doing this isn't the reason I'm getting rewarded. The reason I'm doing this is because I am rewarded. And if you come to Christ at that very last moment, at the end of the evening, you're being blinded now. If you see that light at the very last moment, you come to Jesus. Yes, you'll suffer more, but you will have Jesus in your heart. You will be equally rewarded as I will be for doing this. So when God is pouring his blessings out of that pot into your bowl, you will get overflowing blessings the same as I will, and we will be there together. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. So the guys who say, oh, I wish the Muslims weren't going to do this. I just wish they would be nice and then they wouldn't all have to be destroyed by the Lord. You'll be rewarded for that mourning. And I will be. I wish they wouldn't do this. I wish that they could be stopped, but they can't. They're driven by Satan. They're driven by pure hate, racism and rage, and they want to kill us all. You've heard it from the Bible yourself. Even with Jesus stood there pleading with them, they're not interested because they don't believe on Jesus. So that's the reason they have to be killed and that they will die. But if you mourn for those guys, you mourn for their souls, you will be blessed because you're comforting. You're showing that you're a loving person. So even after this war has happened, we're not going to be rejoicing in the fact that they're all dead. We're rejoicing in the fact that God has seen a victory, but we are mourning for the loss of our brothers because they were misled by Satan. They weren't born evil. Satan made them evil. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the whole of the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be fulfilled. Blessed are the merciful, for they should obtain their mercies. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall seek God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And this is the most important bit. Blessed are they which are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, I suspect this is the reason why you're finding this so difficult to believe. It's not that you're scared of this or you don't think the Bible's true. You're scared of being persecuted for accepting this. The same as I've been persecuted for saying it. Because if you accept it, you will be called by God and your heart will drive you to share this far and wide. Tell everyone you know, everyone you don't know. And they will ridicule you. They will attack you. They will persecute you. We know this. It's been written. And I've had it happen to me personally. That's the reason you're not doing it. It's not because you don't believe on Jesus. You probably do. You don't want to be persecuted. And Jesus, in his own words, is telling you here, blessed are they which are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. For the sake of telling people this, getting told you're a nutter, you're a conspiracist, you're paranoid, you're a religious psycho, you must be on drugs, you don't know what you're talking about, you're mad, you've lost your mind. All these things will be said to you when you preach this. But if you do that, for the sake of righteousness, yours will be the kingdom of heaven. You will be an angel in heaven, and you will be saved. Whereas if you don't, you only have yourself to blame. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and giveth light unto the whole that are in the house. I think we'll end on this verse. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel. So what that means is, when you light a candle, i.e. when you tell people about this, like I'm doing now, and you spread it far and wide, you shout from the rooftops, God is coming to save you and destroy the evil ones. But if you show yourself to be evil, he's going to have no choice but to destroy you as well. So you have to know what's coming. Even at the last minute, if you repent and you come to Jesus, he'll save you. But the candle light that you're putting on the candlestick, that is messages like these, telling people what's going to happen, trying to lead them to Christ. You don't light a candle and then hide it. That's what he's saying here. He's saying there's no point in you believing on these things and only saying them in your head. That's the bushel. The bushel is your head, which hides the light. You need to put it on a candlestick and hold it aloft on the hill. That's what Jesus is telling you. If you believe these things, tell everyone. Don't be afraid. Don't worry about persecution. In a month's time, you won't care about any of that. Make sure you do the Lord's work. Don't do it out of fear-mongering or hatefulness or any other reason, but righteousness and purity of heart, because that's what God wants. And then the last bit is, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. So when you tell people, even if they persecute you and argue and they seem like they're not believing it, you've given them the light. You've given your light to the whole of the house, the light that you got from God. So it means your work is done at that point. And if you prepared well, like I've been telling you should, if you've read this and you've studied, you've listened to what I'm saying, you'll understand. These things are definitely happening. This is fate. This is God's plan. If you believe on Jesus, if you believe on God, then you will believe on this. You will get ready for it now. You won't waste any more time. You could have been doing it today, but you needed me to tell you this, so I've told you it. Now is the time for practical action. Get yourself out there, fill up your cupboards, make your house a little bit more secure, talk to your neighbours, friends and family, do what you are advised by God. Then when the utter destruction comes, it won't be on your head. You will be saved. Thanks be to Christ. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed that and you learnt something. God bless you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. And if you would like to hear the full 2.5 hour stream that this came from, please click on the video to your bottom left hand side, which is yesterday's stream, and I will see you shortly over there. So in the meantime, God bless you all, have a lovely, lovely evening, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye!